before I ask any questions, I think I'm just going to quickly jump into the chat and see if there are questions from anyone, or if there's someone out there who has their hands up and would like to ask a question. While we wait for the hands to go up, I know that Yisa James, Daniela, after this question, you're next. Yisa James asked, and this I'm going to open it up to all the presenters that came on and spoke today. If migration is seen as a part to improvement or getting out of poverty, how do we develop the local communities and stop the imbalance in resource distribution? Knowing migration puts pressure on available resources within the developed spaces. And I think this is a very, very important question, mostly because we tend to forget about the countries that many of the migrants are leaving, and we focus on the destination countries. What about the countries that they are leaving as well? Is there a way to fix the issues that are ongoing there, or to, I guess, reduce the barriers that are there that are creating perhaps the problem that is seen and that is causing many of the migrants to leave the countries? So if any of our presenters could go ahead and answer.
So thank you for this question, which is a very interesting one. We have a lot of field studies, especially in France, but also in Europe, about Africa, especially Francophone Africa. So we have rather good expertise on these Francophone regions. So I shall stress on these examples. And in most of the examples in Western Africa, for example, the valley of Senegal River, including Mali, Mauritania, and Senegal, but also in Morocco and in some other places, we see that the regions where there has been a tradition of migration, because in Africa there is a high tradition of mobility, even if it's not very easy for those who don't have visas, as I told. There are also regional places of mobility institutionalized for work, for example, 5 or 6 regional places of mobility just inside Africa. We see that the regions of mobility and of migration are much well-being than those where there is no migration. There has been a research on that made by the Institute of Research and Development by a Senegalese student and now researcher, showing that, and he also showed that it is totally challenging the social ranks between the population, because those who have more money thanks to migration are so challenging the social and cultural ranking of the population. And so there is a gap between the regions which have a tradition of migration thanks to the remittances and those who don't have tradition of far mobility. First. Second, so this is a very important phenomenon. I shall also add that, as you told, the importance of transnational networks in order to go out of poverty is very important. There is migration because there are networks. If there are no networks, it can be family networks, thanks to former migration, but also language networks. It can be cultural networks, religious networks, economic small enterprises. All these networks are creating more mobility, more opportunities, as it was said, for migration. And where there are no networks, there is no migration, because the networks are creating always more links of possibilities, of opportunities for migration, are bringing new opportunities, are bringing new remittances, are creating facilities of access to double citizenship and all that. And sometimes the countries of emigration are encouraging these networks created by their migrants in order to help some local development program. So the question of networks is crucial in development as a tool of development, but also in creating possibilities for migration.
Thank you, Catherine. Professor Yaro, it looks like you want to jump in and say something.
Yes, so quickly in response to that question. So there are two things. I mean, we have asked people here, where is home to migrants? And they struggle to answer the question, where is home?
Yes.
Because in the past, it was easy to say that, oh yeah, my home was back there, 500 kilometers away. Today, it's difficult to tell where is home. Yes. Increasingly, we have the literature on translocality. Yes. Right, which is bringing us much more closely to the understanding of what is really going on. And of course, I mean, with the phenomenon of globalization and people moving, what we find is that we have connectedness and embeddedness, right, of people in multiple places, and this contributes to I mean, it constitutes the ways of living that are increasingly widespread among people. So therefore, beyond just the economic literature about remittances, right? Which is, I mean, if you were to ask someone the same question 10 years ago, it would be that, yes, remittances goes to help the local economies and brings them up. Today, with the concept of translocality, people are actually living their lives in the two places, right? With internal migration, it's even much more closer because the hierarchy is not that, but with international migration, you have people picking wild berries in Sweden, for instance, and having to have that strong social and spatial bonds with the origin way back in Asia. So that issue is an old debate, really, that today the question of translocality has come to provide a whole new perspective on the understanding of migration and how the different places benefit, or they are actually merged. It's actually hybrid space. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Yaro. I'm going to, so I've seen the hands. I'm going to go with Daniele, then I'll head to Teresita, and after Teresita, I'll go to Michael. So Daniele, please introduce yourself and tell us who you're affiliated with and state your point, please.
Yes, my name is Daniele. I live in New Haven, Connecticut. I am part of ASAP. I serve as treasurer, and I teach in Connecticut, philosophy and political science. My question is very short and very practical, and this is for Professor Catherine Wihtol de Wenden. I'm butchering your name, sorry. And as a European citizen living in the United States with a child who's born in the United States, I would ask if you would welcome or propose or suggest or promote the idea of having a European jus soli. In other words, the idea that if you are born in European soil, you are a citizen of the European Union. This wouldn't solve the causes of migration, obviously, wouldn't solve poverty, but it would perhaps open the way for children of migrants to have more opportunities. And also maybe it would change what you would refer to these recent rise in waves of populism and far right kind of nationalism, and because I suspect that the reason why in almost all European countries we don't have that is in a rooted idea of a national identity that doesn't belong only to the far right part of the European countries, but it's kind of widespread and rooted elsewhere, even in more progressive liberal areas, in the political spectrum. This idea that the nation coincides with an ethnicity, with the religion, with the language, blah blah blah. What would you say about this idea of opening up? In the US, we have the jus soli. That doesn't solve the problems of poverty and the causes of migration. but that would that be something that Europeans should seriously take into consideration?
Yes, thank you. Very good question. Thanks. First, I shall say that there is European citizenship is not recognized. For example, in your country, it is not opposable, as we say in law, by the US or Canada or elsewhere, because it depends of the rule of citizenship of each European country. It is in the domain of subsidiarity, as we say. Each European country has the right to define how you are a foreigner, how you become a national by jus soli or jus sanguinis or some other agreements with some former histories of each country. So there is no acquisition of European citizenship without dependency to the first definition of nationality by each European country. This is very important. So I said that European countries should open more to jus soli, because there are some countries which are still not open so much to jus soli in Europe, for example, like Italy, which is a jus sanguinis country. Hungary is very strongly attached to the so-called Hungarian origin and are giving now Hungarian citizenship to people of former Hungarian origin outside Hungary and outside Europe, for example, to the Ukrainians. Quite 2 million Ukrainians got European Hungarian citizenship, which is also then European citizenship, our passport, for example. So each country in Europe has the right to decide what he wants to do for opening or not the nationality code, and all the more there are an extension of populism, all the more there are the project to restrict the jus soli and to give more room to the jus sanguinis. So it is the reason why I said we have to open our mind to jus soli, which is also the definition of many countries of immigration, of settlement, because if the young is born on this country, he will or she will become a citizen of this country, opening rights that the sons or daughters of illegals don't have in Europe. So it does not cancel, I agree, poverty, but it is a way to be more inclusive towards those who will become, if we want or not, new citizens, new part of the population of the country, especially in countries which are facing with a decreasing population. So I want to tell that.
Thank you. Daniela, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Catherine. I think we'll jump to Teresita, and after Teresita, we'll have Michael.
Yes. Well, thank you. I'm responding to the earlier question about the local communities, and I think Professor Catherine has sufficiently responded in terms of the role of networks. But I'd like to bring in an additional component here, which is the role of the state and public policy. So for countries who are active labor sending countries like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, the Philippines, these countries have the responsibility to promote public policies that promote the welfare of their migrant workers, because they are the ones who are sending them out, because their remittances support the economies of these countries. Now, I must say that in my research on Sri Lanka and Philippines, there are a number of measures that have been shown to work. Not perfect, but they are more than just initial steps to address migrants' welfare. So there are model contracts There are hotlines, there are safe houses, and there are orientation seminars. As you leave the country, there are insurances. So every migrant worker, every Filipino migrant worker who goes, for example, to Singapore, will have a health insurance that covers her medical checkups every 6 months, that allows her to make claims on other medical issues. She has access to the embassy through a hotline, and there's a safe house just in case of abuse. These are measures that have already been put in place and is part of what I call the policy regime. Now, this only works, of course, if the receiving country, in this case, Singapore, also has a policy regime in place. And in my research over the years, Singapore has done quite well relative to other receiving countries, okay? They have put together a set of measures that protect migrant workers' rights. There's the state, the Ministry of Manpower, but there's also the transnational network called the Asian Migrants Network that span most of Southeast Asia. And what you have, for example, an employer like myself in Singapore would want to hire a domestic worker. I am supposed to take an exam. I pay a monthly tax to the government to support a migrant worker. I have to report the salaries that I pay to the migrant worker. She has to have a bank account, and I'm supposed to surrender to the Ministry of Manpower each month the monthly contributions that I make. In other words, there's a very highly regulated regime in the receiving country to protect and promote workers' rights. And this is, I think, part of the discussion that I find is missing here, the whole issue of labor governance. And I think that there should be, some room for us to discuss that sometime in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Tess. You bring up a very good point that I also came across in terms of how some countries, and they specifically talked about the Philippines, that are known for their comprehensive policies aimed at facilitating migration. So, and I do think that it's an important part of the migrants' journey to ensure that I guess their work life, that side, is recognized and that they're looked after. And it's not just on the burden of the country that is receiving the migrants, but also on the country that they are leaving from. A very important aspect as well, because it also contributes to the returns that they bring at the end of the day when it comes to the financial aspects of it and the remittances that come from that as well. So yes, Michael, you have been patiently waiting. Can we hear your point, please?
Very well, thank you, and good afternoon to you all. My position is a follow-up to what Professor Yaro said, particularly the question he said with regards to where is home. I would follow up with a question that says that where is the origin? I'm asking this at the back of various emerging trends or terminologies that are used to classify migrants. So we have the issue of dual citizens. Where is home, or where is the country of origin for dual citizens? Bearing in mind, and when you take dual citizens, then you would also quickly then look at returned migrants. Then you'd come quickly to look at various domestic legislation that forbids dual citizens and or returned migrants from taking up certain positions in politics. Then you quickly then make a quick detour to look at various economic policies that, for instance, the issue of mutual tax agreements. I think that we, as our scholars of migration, should begin to look at terminologies or framing terminologies that are consistent and or that catches up with global trends and development, so that it doesn't leave us also very confused. Because much as we follow through these terminologies, or we continue to use this terminology, emerging issues such as the mutual tax agreement, such as issue of disqualification of returned migrants from holding certain positions in countries which is difficult to define as their home country because they have probably naturalized somewhere else, gets the whole discourse a bit confusing. And if there are suggestions as to how we proceed from here, it would be very helpful. If Professor Yaro can help me out, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I think so. Now we've moved. You know, in the context of internal migration, this is a pretty much easy case, right? But in the context of international migration, there are different protocols and different countries, different rules, you know, and as mentioned earlier on by the two other, you know, speakers, it pretty much depends on the kind of conventions that countries sign up to. And it depends on the local protocols that politicians put in place in order to serve their interests. In the case of Ghana, you see very clearly how smart politicians are to introduce a dual citizenship system and at the same time preclude people of dual citizenship from taking up positions that will be a threat to them. So I guess really, as mentioned by, I'm not sure what it was, Catherine, that we need to look at the various practices and policies in different countries that have led to or have enhanced the benefits of migration. And in the case of Ghana, of course, that is the case. How do we really practicalize our I'm not sure what the name of that campaign was. It the year of return and all those, you know, slogans, right? How do we practicalize these in policy so that migrants, you know, who are returning or who are engaged in multiple locations can act in the interest of national development, can act in the interest of national development in the destination country, right? How do we encourage that that multi-skill functionality of migrants, their benefits to origin and to destination, without these rules, you know, necessarily creating problems. And of course, having a problem with answering the question, where is home, when home can actually be two places. Yeah, that is what I will have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Michael, just also add to the point that I think the fact that we're having this webinar is important because as you're talking about how, as scholars, we need to catch up with a lot of this terminology. I think by having these kind of webinars, we're able to, you know, have discussions around it, see where we're all standing and how we can go forward once we're done here. So I do hope that answered your question.
Very well. I think I would continue the discourse with Professor Yaro when I visit him in his office. Thank you.
Thank you. We are running out of time. If there is no question coming from the audience, going once, twice. And I would just like to say thank you so much for attending and making this webinar very successful. Very interesting topics brought up, or rather points about the topic, and I think we could go on forever. I know somebody even brought up the fact that we need to look at poverty, migration, and corruption, for example. The topic could extend and go further into other areas. But unfortunately, we only have enough time for what we've discussed today. And hopefully, if there are any of you, I'm just going to leave the organization's email address that if you want to, you could email us as well to have a discussion further on, perhaps later on down the line, about this particular topic. Thank you so much to everyone who attended. And on behalf of ASAP, Academic Stand Against Poverty, and the Global Justice Program, thank you so much for attending. And a special thank you to our speakers as well, who took time out of their day to come and share with us their knowledge, their expertise on this particular subject. We do hope that this is not the last time we will be having a discussion about this, and hopefully we will be having more talks around this topic on migration, because it is an important topic. And I saw some scholars talking about how they've been studying this for years and they've been researching it for years. So I do hope that in future we'll have more talks around this. Thank you so much to everyone who attended.